I want to thank you all very much for joining us this evening. We believe that our church is not just a building, but it's all our community, and we're trying to reach out to leaders in our community as yourselves, and we want to become a more intricate part of our community. So thank you very much. I'll introduce the panelists, and then if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, please. I'll start with Crystalline, is with our Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce. She's the CEO and president. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and then.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And can I just take a moment to applaud your thinking outside of the box and even inviting the chamber to a meeting like this. I don't think this is somewhere people would expect the chamber to show up. So I'm just so honored to be a part of this. So thank you. I'm Crystalline Geet. I'm the president and chief executive optimist for our Chamber of Commerce. And I have lived on the coast side for just almost 2.5 years. It's been life-changing for me in the absolute most positive of ways. And so I look forward to giving back in every way possible. I'm also a weekly volunteer at Table of Plenty, for those familiar with that. So volunteering to help our different groups in the community is also very, very close to my heart. And I don't know if there's anything else specific you want to know, but I champion business causes and trying to make sure that our businesses thrive, make our community thrive.
Thank you. And next I'd like to introduce Judith from, she's our executive director from Coastside Hope.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Teresa. And I see some familiar faces. Thank you for inviting me. I've been on the coast since I was 11. Before working for Coastside Hope, I worked for the Boys and Girls Club at Coastside. So that's where I met some of you guys. And thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here with you guys.
Thanks a lot. And next is Eric Taboden, and he is the executive director here of Abundant Grace in town.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to participate in tonight's event. It's good to see you all, a lot of familiar faces. So, and at Abundant Grace, I'm sure most of you know, the Lutheran Church community has been bringing sandwiches every week. Often Kay shows up and some other folks have shown up to drop off sandwiches, and we sure appreciate the connection. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I just need to let you all know that we're recording this session because it's a lot to remember what each of you tell us, and we want to go back and remember what you said. So thank you very much for letting us do that. So I'll start off with the questions, and I'll go around and not make each of you be the first one for each question, just so that it's easier for all of you and it gives you a little break. All right. So our first question, I'll give Crystalline, I'll ask you the first question. It says, from your vantage point, what are the major changes you have seen in the community in the last 2 years since you've been here, and what do you think we're going to look like in the next 5 years?
I think in the time I've been here, obviously the most changes come from COVID. And I think COVID, if you could find a silver lining to COVID, was it brought a lot of groups together. And I think over time, communities, ebb and flow on how close knit of a community it is, and then it kind of diverges and brings back. So I think we're in this beautiful place where the community has come back together, is very aware of the different sections that make up our community and trying to support them all and bring them all in. So the changes that I have seen for the most part have been very, very positive. And then I think where we're going is just really continuing down that path. I think between the COVID issues and the equality issues, a lot of eyes have been opened, a lot of attention is being paid, and I think it's only going to make everything much stronger and more cohesive as time goes on.
Thank you. Judith, I'll ask you the same questions. From your vantage point, what are the major changes you've seen in the community the last 5 years, and what do you think will look like in another 5 years?
So I'll echo what Crystalline has says, but I have a different perspective because a lot of our clients come into our office seeking assistance. So I think what I can tell you is that for sure the housing industry, the cost of living and cost of housing has affected a lot of our clients. We've seen a lot of people move out of the area because they can't afford to live here anymore. I think another, looking back in the last 5 years, one of the not so positive events that happened was Bay City closing, and that was a lot of people that worked in the agriculture farm industry that since that place closed, they've been struggling to find a permanent place to work because a lot of the farming is going away in our community or has scaled down to a level where there's a farm that cannot really hire 100 people or over 50. They tend to be smaller. For us also, I think a lot of people don't realize that aside from social services, we also provide immigration services in our office. So the treatment of immigrants was a big change from previous years. Hopefully we're moving towards the right direction towards a more humane treatment, but the last 4 years were a little bit challenging for all of our immigrant clients. And whether you realize it or not, immigration has an impact on the financial stability of families. So we saw, some of those effects happening with families and their situations.
Thank you. Okay, Eric, I'll ask you those questions now from your vantage point. What are the major changes you've seen in the last 5 years in our community, and what do you think will look like in the next 5 years?
So for me, I agree with Judith. I think housing has become tighter and tighter for people. And I've been involved with a lot of, conversations in the city about affordable housing, and nothing has really had any legs, and taken off. There's different folks that are looking at sites, potential locations for affordable housing development, but it just has not happened. And it's very impactful on families that are squeezed into, multifamily rental situations. And it's very stressful, very difficult on people, and it's been exacerbated by the COVID crisis. So yeah, as far as the homeless community that we work with, largely that has been a steady number of folks. We still see, a solid 15 people showing up for work every morning easily. And I imagine that will increase because now the Coastside Inn is going to be up and running by the end of April, and they have 50 rooms. So I think we'll be seeing an increase in the number of people that are looking for work, but also people that are in transition. So the folks that are going to be at the Coastside Inn will be transitioning into their own long-term housing. They're not going to be permanently at the Coastside Inn. They'll be looking for an apartment to rent. So that's we'll see that shift in the homeless population over the next 5 years and get a sense of how that's going to impact the community. So in 5 years, I would love to see an affordable housing development open. I will say, we did at one point, we had some conversations with people at the Lutheran Church about the property there and moving the daycare center back and the possibility of obtaining a permit to develop affordable housing. It's for your community, that could be some avenue towards engaging the housing crisis in a real positive way.
Thank you. So Judith, I'll ask you the first question. The second question, in your role or organization, what are the most difficult issues you're currently facing?
Oh my God. I think housing will be something that I talk about a lot. As Eric has mentioned, we have families that are living in congregate situations, and at least this past year, COVID made that a lot worse, more challenging. There was no room for isolation, which meant if one person in the household was COVID positive, it meant everyone else. You're talking about loss of income. So at least for the 2 years, for the past year and now this year, our clients really have been suffering from financial stability, which means, I can tell you that right now, the largest request for assistance is rental assistance. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was food. Right now is rental assistance because we're open for 3 weeks, we're closed for 1 week, we're open again, really affects our clients who are the people working at the restaurants, at the farms, not the highest paying jobs that depend on two incomes to make the household. So that has been some of the more challenging situations that we see, that people have not been able to work. Some people, are not able to apply for unemployment or receive any of the federally sponsored programs, even though they work really hard. So for us, just trying to figure out a way to best help them. We've done rental assistance, but we've also done financial assistance grants. One of those efforts was in collaboration with Abundant Grace and ALAS. And we're still doing that for some of our community members.
Thank you. Crystal, I'll ask you that question also. It's in your role or organization, what are the most difficult issues you're currently facing?
So I would have to say government advocacy in regards to helping protect the 99% from the 1%. So there's consistently government regulations coming down, that is making it harder for small business to do business versus making it easier for big business to get bigger. COVID, the pandemic really showed some real hot colors on that. So advocating so that our smaller businesses can continue to work and provide the services that they want to provide, and then helping them get a workforce. There's a disconnect between what businesses what businesses are looking for and the candidates, and so helping bridge that gap with trainings and those types of things. So our chamber is working towards more opportunities like that.
Thank you. So Eric, in that question, it's your role or organization. Where do you find the most difficult issues that you're currently facing?
That's such a great question. So we are in the middle of, a year-long process of renovating the Senior Coastsiders thrift store and turning into a workforce center. I've had construction going on since October, I think, and it shows no signs of letting up. We do have 2 bathrooms in now, and we're doing pavers in the back, and we're going to do a project with rebuilding together and add another fence. And it's been overwhelming. That's been a challenge, is setting up. We added a staff person and a director of philanthropy. So, I went from a little over a year ago just working out of my van as one person, meeting the homeless folks at the More for Less, to having 2 staff people and a site. And so we're implementing, a whole process of structures to support the new staff. We're going to add another staff person this year. And the main challenge is stability. Frankly, it's just, really settling into the place, settling into our routine of the work programs and the collegial relationship with Life Moves and other agencies like Coastside Hope, to help support people making the transformations in their lives that they want to make. And I would come back again to what's always challenging is housing. Folks that we work with often do get a voucher for housing, but it expires because they cannot find a place that will take their voucher, you know? And so it's very difficult to find housing.
Thank you.
Hey,
Eric,
Teresa, I'm sorry, Teresa. Boys and Girls Club executive just let me know that Dave is going to contact you tomorrow, and he will address all the questions tomorrow.
all right, thank you so much.
You got it.
All right. And Eric, I'll have you start with this next question. What are the primary signs of hope for the future that you see, and what groups are doing the most to address community needs, and how?
So just for me, in the context of abundant grace, the biggest sign of hope is twofold. It's the amazing purchase of the Coastside Inn by the county. Life Moves now has the contract to move forward with housing the homeless there. And I'm so excited about what that's going to mean for our local homeless population. And then our work has just been amazing. It's been literally like riding a rocket ship for the last, 15 months since we bought the building. Just so many people have come forward to help, to volunteer, to come up, to partner with us on different projects. It's blown my mind how fast things are moving right now. And it's been very hopeful. The Lutheran Church, the Girl Scouts, the Methodist Church, and then some single folks are all getting together and bringing us sandwiches and dropping off donations. And, we've found jobs for people outside of our jobs. It's just, it's been really great to be working with the homeless community right now, because there is hope with the Coastside Inn and the possibility of getting housing.
Thank you. Okay, so Crystalline, I'll ask you that question. What are the primary signs of hope for the future that you see, and what groups are doing the most to address community needs, and how?
Yeah, so I am an optimist at heart, so all I see is hope. So that would be a very long-winded answer. There's so many things. So I would like to just point out the organizations that I think are doing the most amazingest job. So you've got two of them here, obviously Abundant Grace and Coastside Hope. Could not love them more. I think also Alas, which was mentioned, Puente for the Pescadero area has been just so amazing. And then all of the smaller groups such as Rotary and Table of Plenty, and we have so many Boys and Girls Club, and we just have so many fantastic nonprofits on this coastside. It's actually overwhelming about how many groups are here to help the community thrive, and I think that's all on the hope spectrum. So that's my very Pollyanna answer, but I don't have a grim answer, to be honest.
Thank you. No, every answer is good. It's all helping all of us. Thank you. So Judith, I ask you the same questions. What are the primary signs of hope for the future that you see, and what groups are doing the most to address community needs, and how?
The biggest signs of hope that I saw was the response of our community members to the need. For us, last year was one of the best fundraising years. We asked for help and we received help from the community. Along the lines as to what Crystalline is saying, all the local nonprofit organizations that are responding rapidly to the needs of our community as we're dealing with different disasters. The collaboration that we have done. I remember back last year when the fires were going on, Rita and I have worked together before, and we found ourselves together in the trailer, and we just looked at each other and said, could we just handle one disaster at a time? That was us thinking, but she did an amazing job, and we were able to help as well. And then as we move through this pandemic, just whenever I think I have found normal, something new comes up. But the fact that every time we ask for help, the community responds, to me, that's the greatest sign of hope and solidarity, that we are going to make it through this and we're going to do it together.
Thank you, Judith. Okay, Crystal, and I'll have you start off with the next question. What issues may prevent this community from effectively dealing with challenges in the future, and what is needed?
Oh, I apologize. It blipped out at the beginning of that question.
I'll start again, sure. What issues may prevent this community from effectively dealing with challenges in the future, and what is needed?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, if you're ever on Nextdoor, you probably see a lot of it. There are pockets of the community that are a bit self-centered and, kind of wish that the community had a gate around it and really just kind of come at things with a bit of a self-centered point of view. And if that were to catch on any farther, that could be of detriment to the community, because it's just a negative point of view, and sometimes negative opinions spread far and wider than we would like them to. So I think that the biggest detriment is people's attitudes, if allowed to spread. So thankfully, there's a lot of groups like yourself that are trying to find ways to bring positivity to the community, and I think that can help offset it. But negative people are a bit loud and talk a lot.
Thank you. I'll ask that same question. Judith, what issues may prevent this community from effectively dealing with challenges in the future, and what is needed?
I'll echo some of Crystalline's response, especially when it comes to the again, just because we work with it and we see it, to the immigration feel. Some people can have an opinion where they're not well informed about what it takes to actually become an immigrant in this country. But also on the other side, for our social services, the challenge of building affordable housing on the coast. I had the pleasure of working at the club when the skate park was built and the gym was built, but those were efforts that took a really long time, because what makes our town great also sometimes makes it not the greatest. If we could have more housing, but that also comes with some other challenges. And again, the loss of agricultural jobs, or not necessarily the less skilled jobs, but if we are going to have less of those jobs, we should have more educational opportunities for people to be able to work in different jobs.
Thank you. So Eric, I'll ask you that question. What issues may prevent this community from effectively dealing with challenges in the future, and what is needed?
So I would say very much I'm in agreement with our previous panelists, Judith and Crystalline. It's greed, classism, and racism. This town often feels like two communities to me, because of race and economic divides. And what is needed is a real positive force of coming together in the spirit of equality and inclusion and compassion and sharing and social justice. All the things that are elemental, in so many faith traditions, needs to be proclaimed and enacted. In my opinion, it's really, I think it really takes, creating circles of community that do concrete things to make this community better and stronger, and set out goals around inclusion and affordable housing, racial justice, economic justice, and so on. And, faith communities are uniquely positioned to do that. And they ought to take the lead.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, and then-
Lisa, there's a question in the chat, so can I just throw it out there?
Sure.
It's for Eric. How many affordable housing units do you estimate are needed on the coast? Do you know?
I don't know, but 50%, we did a study about 5 years ago, and 50% of the respondents, it was all in Spanish, are doubled, tripled, and quadrupled up in housing. 50%. So if you imagine there's 11 or 12,000 people in Half Moon Bay, we're 30% Latino, 40%. So maybe that's 4,000 people, doubled and tripled up. So if you do 2-bedroom units, is that 2,000 units? It's a lot, right? It's a lot. And we do not have enough affordable housing in this community. So we need a lot of affordable housing in order to take the pressure off those families.
Crystalline's raising her hand. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could just chime in on that. I also would love, and Eric and Judith might correct me if I'm incorrect, but there's also, I think, a misunderstanding about what affordable housing is versus minimum wage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so people say affordable housing, but like I'm in the context of most people, I make a buttload. I can't hardly afford to live here. As by the time I pay my apartment and my basic bills, I have $400 to live off of. That's all my gas, all my food, and all of my extras. So for somebody making minimum wage, affordable housing is not even attainable. So I do hope that eventually people start to really understand that it's not what we would consider affordable housing is not so. It's minimum wage and below housing that we need to get on the coast. And I think Eric is exactly right. I mean, it's in like the 2,000s and 3,000s because unlike most other communities, we just don't even have proper apartment buildings. So the fact that those have been not really allowed to be erected throughout the coast side is definitely a real hardship, even for our business community, because workforce is such a issue.
What I learned early on in the conversation was, we went to a city council meeting, and the affordable housing they were talking about was for people earning 75,000 or lower, and everybody likes to say it's for firefighters and teachers, but that's just racist. I mean, to be honest, it is. That's for white people, Farm workers are making 25,000 a year, And so let's be clear. Maybe I should not say affordable housing. I should say extremely low income housing, ELI,
Right.
which is far below affordable housing levels.
Judith, do you have anything to add to this part of our conversation here? It's like,
Yeah, and I would agree with what Crystalline says. And through the networks and meetings I attend with other nonprofits, we often think about like, at what point or how much longer can our employees continue to work here and not be also our clients? Because I'm on Crystalline's boat as well. I live by myself, so I can afford, but it's challenging, and many of our several of our workers are also similar to our clients. They're living with their family members so they can afford a place to live on the coast.
yeah.
So Teresa, do we have time there's one more question for Judith.
We do. And then I have.
Okay, here's the question.
Go ahead.
Will passage of SB 91 help tenants and landlords in this community?
Joanne, it will, but there has to be a mutual agreement between the tenant and the landlord. The landlord has to be willing to take 80% of the amount that's owed. And there is document requirements. And to be honest with you, a lot of our clients don't live in the ideal landlord-tenant situation. In a home of 5, you would think there's a family of maybe 7. The reality is that there's a family per room in a home of 5 because our clients could not afford a home like that. So luckily, there's other programs that we have in place that will be able to help our clients. But yeah, if a landlord and a tenant can come to that agreement, that will definitely relieve their situation.
Thank you.
Eric or Crystalline, do you have anything to add to that, or you're fine? Okay. Yeah. I mean, what, and I just throw this out here. I know this isn't part of this question, but I volunteer at Colorcitas High School, and now that it's COVID times, I'm doing things more with Zoom, but yeah, I've gone into the classes, and there's kids sleeping in the classroom, and it's because they are in one of those households like that, and they can't even sleep. They have to, some of them are sleeping in a chair. I mean, it's just, yeah, so I totally understand what you're saying. So yeah. So this is our last question. It says, I'll start it off with Crystalline. What role do you see faith communities playing in the building of a healthy community?
I would say championing the causes that help the minimalized in our community. I think we're in one of those situations where we want, all boats to rise, and we want to make sure that the people that have been marginalized and not taken care of are finally being recognized and seen. And I think that Eric really touched on it earlier, that is a really key place where our faith-based groups, I think already, and I'm just going to be totally honest, I did not grow up in a faith-based household, so I don't, the only ideals I know of faith-based community is what I've seen on TV, so I apologize. But so, what I think a faith-based community is just that. It's a group of loving people that have a shared ideal and want everybody to do well and thrive. And I think the more that you can put that out there in the community will be of most benefit, and helping the nonprofits like Coastside Hope and Abundant Grace, and whether that's through volunteering, because volunteers have been falling off the face of the earth. So even for our chamber, it used to be that volunteers were aplenty, and now it's like pulling teeth to get somebody to give up some of their time to help on any given project. So that's one way that I think would help. And then, helping spread the word as things come out. Because there's so many different pockets of smaller niche communities within our larger community, sometimes it's hard to get the word about a very awesome program, or, where, let's just, for instance, right now, where vaccines are going to be at any given time or when they're popping up. Currently right now we play a big game of telephone trying to get that word out, but the more organizations that we have within our fold to be able to use as a megaphone for these important programs is also extremely helpful. And to Judith's point, earlier in the pandemic, when the call went out about needing funds for the 3 nonprofits who had come together and all of that, I think a lot of those donations, based off of what I saw, just came from other nonprofits, again, just tooting the horn and saying, we've got to be a part of this, we've got to help this. And so really just continuing that momentum. And if that's not something that you're already doing, figuring out ways to do that.
Thank you. So Judith, I'll ask you that question too. What role do you see faith communities playing in the building of a healthy community?
To echo what Crystalline is saying, but also we're an organization that really depends on a large volunteer force. when the pandemic hit, we lost a lot of our volunteers because they were part of the high-risk population. So I can tell you that I personally also felt the impact of not having volunteers because I was out there with my team packing food and doing whatever needed to be done. We have two food programs that we run on a monthly basis, and they depend largely on a volunteer force. One of them is Brown Bag, which we deliver food to seniors at Bloom Lane. Right now we're delivering over 100 seniors, and our Family Harvest program during non-COVID, it requires a lot of pre-packing. So when the families drive up, you just load the food in the car. But also what you guys are doing right now, taking the time to learn more about what each of us do in our community, and being open to learning new things. And I'm also not the best Catholic. I grew up Catholic, but I do believe that Eric is right. The faith-based community is in a great place to help make a difference.
Thank you. And Eric, that's the final question is, what role do you see faith communities playing in the building of a healthy community?
Love your neighbor. I think from your tradition, when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? It's love God with your whole heart and your neighbor as yourself. He actually told you there was two things. And I think really the most important thing is love your neighbor. Be about things that are compassionate towards others, uniting and not dividing, right? Loving, not blaming and shaming. And the Lutheran Church is a leader in that kind of work. I think the faith communities in our city, particularly like the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church, you have a lot of land, and ought to give a fair consideration to what would it take to build affordable housing on that land. I know there are some folks that are in dialogue with the Catholic Church right now that are looking at the property behind the Catholic Church and wondering if there's a possibility. But it's something that your faith community could do as well. The Episcopal Church has looked at land behind their property that might be up for sale. So, people are considering what they can do, and it's really important. The housing crisis is it's on everybody's top. It's the top of everybody's list when they think of what is really hitting the community the hardest. So I think being a leader in promoting a vision of community that is loving and accepting, and work with Coastside Pride, work with the Coastside Families Taking Action, which is another local group doing great work. The Black Lives Matter movement. ALAS, I will say, is one of my favorite local groups. My wife is on their board, and we go to all their events, and I love the work that they're doing in the community. Really generous, culturally appropriate. They're involved in work on the border, and they've helped some families come up here and be sponsored. They do amazing work. So, one thing is, just to partner with other nonprofits, be involved with other nonprofits, and allow yourselves to be, transformed and proclaim that vision.
Thank you.
Love your neighbor.
Thank you, Eric. Pastor Sue, are there any other questions that were added to our?
There are a couple. So this one kind of piggybacks on what Eric was just saying. It says Coastside Lutheran has several acres of raw land at its site. As Eric mentioned, we've considered low-income housing as a long-term land use. How receptive do you think the community would be to this use? And are there other uses of the church's land or building that each of you think could help bring the community together? So 2 parts to that question. receptivity to low-income housing, and then other uses.
So Judith, do you want to
It's for
start?
everybody, yeah.
I think this is the part where we realize that there's some community members that are really willing to help and others that are not. I remember attending a listening session at the Brewing Company when they were talking about possibly maybe doing when the housing crisis before the pandemic came. And I think there's a lot of people that would be receptive to the idea because it's what we need. But there's also a lot of opposing views, just like it was with the shelter. I got to hear some of the feedback provided about the shelter, and I was shocked to see that some of those people lived in our community not our community, because it was so negative. So I think it's what I'm saying about Half Moon Bay, that it's such a great town, but sometimes we're so afraid of change. I mean, I think it would be a great idea if that land could be used. I mean, think about all the families that you could house and help. But I think it's going to need a lot of support from all of us so that it can be well received and diminish the opposition to it.
Crystalline?
I fully agree with Judith. I think really housing on there would be the absolute most benefit. I think based off of what I have seen, the reception will be terribly negative. But that's because even to Judith's point, when the people who have typically opposed most any housing, that's not a gazillion dollars, they tend to tout a lot of misinformation, and they even did it when Eric was bidding on the facility that he's in now. It's quite gross, the lengths that some people will go to try to keep that any type of growth. And so I think this would be a place where your community could play a very strong role if you went into a project like that with a very strong-willed position that you want to help that section, the section of our population that needs it most. And the unfortunate thing about the negative voices is, if you really count the people, they are the minority. They are 10 to the 1,000. The issue is that the other 1,000 are very passive and don't want to make waves, and they don't want to piss anybody off, and they don't want to be seen as oppositional, whereas the people who actually are oppositional have no problem being seen that way. So I think if you guys were willing to undertake it and really just be a champion of change and a champion of our community, it would be taking on that project and just doing it with, quite honestly, a bullheaded optimism that people just couldn't ignore.
Thank you. And Eric, you kind of touched on it, but if you can kind of elaborate a little more about it.
Sure. First of all, if you're thinking about it, you should start making more friends in the Kehoe neighborhood, because that's your main opposition right there. But I will say, Crystalline, was right. There was some, a lot of critical comments that really aren't really based in reality. When we were doing Abundant Grace and the purchase at 515 Kelly, but we did not have a lot of public opposition. Even in the planning meeting, we brought everybody we could to the planning meeting. And I thought we had about 100 people there, and there was not one person to voice opposition. Same thing in city council meetings. Not one person stood up and voiced opposition. They all, the opposition came through like letters to the editor and letters to city council and that sort of thing. So this kind of project would definitely gather, there'd be more opposition. But there's a city council right now that is so supportive, and the city planners are so ready to see an affordable housing project get started. I think you would have a lot of support, tremendous support and guidance. And there are development organizations like Mercy Housing that does this very type of thing with churches that have property that they want to convert into affordable housing. And they can walk you through what is a daunting process, but they know how to do it. And, you just partner with them and go through that period. It'll probably take a number of years, but it's doable.
Thank you.
So, Jean is asking, beside community support and land purchase, are there other big hurdles to getting low-income housing here?
If I can say something about that, I think when you think about this project, you guys would really have to champion and find, as Eric says, make friends with the Kehoe neighborhoods, because they are homeowners and they, in a sense, have a voice. The people who are living in affordable housing are not homeowners, and at times don't even have the right to vote or speak up. So that's sometimes a challenge. And that's why they rely in community organizations like Eric's, Ala's, COSI Hope, because we can speak for them. But really, you guys as a church and a community would really have to champion that effort, because you are dealing with a community that could not maybe speak up or does not want to be speaking up out of fear. Battling people who own homes and have been there for such a long time.
Okay. So,
Eric.
Go ahead.
Can I say one thing? So the most innovative thing you could do to really transform systemically what affordable housing is to pursue a new idea, which is like an affordable condominium complex where people can own their condominium and sell it and gain equity, because it's the number one problem for extremely low income and low income renters, is that at the end of the day, no matter how many years have gone by, all that money has gone into the owner's pocket to pay their mortgage, and they don't have any equity to show for it, nothing. So if you do pursue something like this, I would strongly urge you to research models that somehow allow families who are renting the properties to establish and grow equity for themselves, because that's really a game changer for historical poverty, generational poverty, and so on and so forth.
Nice. Okay, so there was one other question that actually I put in there. What issues do you see impacting children in our community right now?
Crystalline, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. So it's something that we knew pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic really showed how bad it was the digital divide. So many of our kids were impacted when school went to Zoom, with the lack of internet and conductivity infrastructure on the coast side, and some nonprofits are working towards trying to get the county and the state to really work towards making that better, and the library helped with hotspots, but it's just a really large infrastructure problem that needs a lot of different organizations championing the different ideas that are coming out on how to make it better, because even our businesses have a hard time conducting business because their internet goes out and everything is online now. And then another thing that is becoming more of an issue is that the kids are not leaving school work ready. They are no longer really learning skills in school, and this is not unique to our district by any means, so it's not a dig on Cabrillo, but I get a lot of feedback that kids, businesses are trying to hire kids out of high school to give them internships, and then it doesn't work out because the kids just don't even have basic customer service skills, or they don't know how to do basic math or whatever those things are. So figuring out how to better educate our kids that with skills that actually help them after the fact, after school. And then the third one is that attendance was from my understanding, attendance was extremely low during the pandemic, and a good chunk of that was originally thought to be digital issues, and then upon further examination, they found out that the kids had to work. So when they didn't have to go to a school site, they ended up having to go to a work site to help their families get through this period. So if we want so this just kind of brings it full circle, but if we want our children to do better or have a better shot, then it circles back to the other conversations that we've had. But when kids are involved, we really need to focus on them as a part of the bigger picture, but also as a part of the smaller picture, making sure that they're taken care of.
So Crystalline, do you feel like the second point about the kids not being work ready, is that challenging the school system, or is that like mentoring? Kids need mentoring, or how would you see that problem being attacked?
I think it's a mentoring. Well, I think the fastest possible helpful fix to it is mentoring, because getting a school to change the curriculum probably takes as long as building affordable housing. So there's no way that they would pivot like that. And when talking to a lot of business owners and stuff, they kind of actually pin it back to when home ec was discontinued in the school systems, because that taught them a little bit of sewing, a little bit of cooking, a little bit of checkbook management. Our poor kids are leaving school with no financial wherewithal whatsoever. And so I think a good mentorship program could really go a long way. And there are lots of different nonprofits that tackle different pieces of it, but there's by no means enough nonprofits currently doing that to cover all of the children that really need it. So another nonprofit being in the mix. And I want to say, I think that was something that Teresa has a familiarity with.
And it's like I've teaching finance classes, teaching the kids how to balance their checkbooks. I did it on my own in the very beginning, and then Rotary took it on, where we teach the kids how to balance their checkbooks, how to keep your credit good, and then we go over like how much you'd have to pay for a car if you have terrible credit because you didn't pay your bills on time. And then we teach them how to dress for an interview, and we do mock interviews. So the Rotary has taken that on. It was kind of hard the last year because of COVID. And so, but now I'm thinking we could start again in September, hopefully, and start to get into the schools. And I definitely want to teach them finance because it's really important. I was a banker, but my family, they never taught the kids, as kids, nothing much about finances. So it's important to know about that.
And I think that's a really long-term issue that's been going on because, I'm 40, and when I was in school in the 90s, and like financial management was never a thing. Like we never learned that. We didn't learn about checkbooks or anything like that. And now you have a crop of kids in school now that are being brought up by people like my age, that didn't learn that in school, so they don't necessarily have that to instill on their kids. So I think it's only going to get worse. And the ones that are doing well either already started off with a leg up, and or they're just lucky enough that they had a parent that took the time to learn it and understand it. So, but that goes with the other job skills as well, all the way down to the very, very basics of customer service and how to treat people. And that even goes back to Eric's point of love thy neighbor. A lot of people don't get that message growing up, and then to learn it as an adult can be harder.
Does anyone want to add to that?
I think Crystalline hit a key point that for us, we see it. Sometimes kids are not even 18 and they're contributors to the household income. I think another one of the, another issue that's affecting kids right now during the pandemic is, as we talked about it before, not having a quiet space where they can do their homework or where they can concentrate. Also, a lot of our clients are not able to assist their kids with their schoolwork in their current setting because they themselves maybe didn't go past a certain grade in school. So I think that's we've seen and heard from some of our parents that that's a big challenge, and the option of going back to school would be great, because that would also mean that they get more of the attention that they need. Again, the parents are not at times able to help them or are not even familiar with Zoom, or I think the digital divide has been very apparent in the basic way of even knowing the full capacity of your phone. We help a lot of clients apply for unemployment, and right now unemployment requires you to have an email, and there is times where they will actually FaceTime you to verify that it's you. And our clients walk around with a smartphone, but they don't really know how to use it to their full capacity.
Thank you. So do any of the panelists have questions to ask of us? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart for coming on with us. And thank you so much for participating. And we're going to take all your information and put it together and come up with a plan to make our community a better place to live in. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us. It's really great.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.